one of the concepts underpinning the design of many business premises today is that of agile workplace. What exactly does an agile workplace mean? What is it?
Well, I think there's two schools of thought, really. It's a term that has come out of a way of working relative to the development of the software industry, but it's also been picked up by the general office environment relative to, in some ways, being more flexible relative to people coming and going. So in some ways, it's perhaps been an extension of hoteling, which we probably saw 15 years ago developing, that people are more fluid and flexible relative to being out and about and perhaps working from home and then coming in. So it's not catering for everybody in the office all of the time. But it's been picked up from the property point of view as a way of, I think, heavily reducing the meter rate or down per head in an organisation. So it's no designated desks, it's locker, it's other facilities. But at the same point, there's actually been a development called not agile working, but activity-based working, which I think has got a lot more science and design thought behind it. It was developed in the Netherlands. And that's really basically analysing the different tasks and functions and the requirements around those that are needed. So creating different settings within an office environment for different functions. So if you're going to meet or you're going to take a phone call, they're different requirements in that sense. So activity-based working, I think, has got more theory behind it and is driven by looking at people and what they actually need to do the various functions, as opposed to the agile aspect of just cutting real estate down, which we've seen prevalent in the market over the last 3 or 4 years in that sense. If we just come back to the origin of the word and my comment about it being developed in the software industry, it came down to basically having groups of people working as a team to develop a product and write code, and a methodology around how they bring problems to a head, resolve them, people disperse, work on code, test it, come back. And during that, there was a lot of sort of whiteboard development, because effectively developing a project is in the computer, and that has a limitation relative to the dynamics of people and the cross communication. So the term agile really is a methodology that was developed for the software industry, but is now taking a hold on corporate activity. And we've seen that with a lot of the banks developing different systems of working. And I suppose it comes down to the tradition of big organizations being in departments, whereas now what's happening, and has been probably for 5 years, is that it's around project-based rather than sort of a department delivering something in a chain, but actually people with a whole range of skills from those departments coming together and working together on a project for a deliverable. So the whole tradition of how large organizations actually function is changing quite dramatically, and obviously innovation and the IT side of things relative to software is accelerating at quite a rate.
So what would be the benefits for an organisation implementing an agile workplace?
I think probably really looking at what people are doing and providing the right setting to facilitate that in a more productive, inspiring way. I think the word innovation is sort of wound into part of agile working. So organizations are realizing that, the marketplace and their position in it is becoming more and more competitive. And the only way you sort of keep up or gain traction or position in the marketplace in your industry is by innovating and change. So that becomes the incremental factor of success. And agile working is a term that really, I suppose, facilitates the environment and the methodology in that environment for delivering to a higher standard.
Okay, so that's the benefits, but are there any negatives?
Well, I think we've pushed real estate down to a sort of a minimum square metre per person. That's been the driver to drive the cost of real estate down. But I think people get a little bit lost as to its proportion relative to the whole cost of an organisation. I mean, obviously salaries are the biggest factor. Real estate is the second, but it's a small proportion. Maybe relates to 15% of the overall cost of an organisation rather than 85. So why wouldn't you provide an environment that maximises your 85% of your cost, which is your people, and providing an environment that stimulates, meets their well-being and health requirements, and also embodies what they're doing from a set of value point of view. So I think there's an opportunity, an increased opportunity for design and good thinking design to have an increased part in that role. So it's always getting that intelligence ahead of the dollar drive, in organisations, to push the price down, to save money. Sometimes has a short-sighted viewpoint relative to the bigger picture in that sense. So not treating this term of agile working as a form of reducing costs, but more about how can we enhance the lives and output of our people for the corporation, and a sensible relationship between employee and employer.
Will the concept change or evolve as a result of the COVID lockdown situation we've been through?
Yes, I think it will. How that actually lands is anybody's guess. We've obviously, perhaps the biggest factor of agile working has been the development of technology and the ability to work in a remote setting, so that effectively, now that we're sort of online in any kind of situation with Wi-Fi and laptops and so forth, that has been a major shift in the agile environment, both within an office and being able to move around the office and carry your work desk, which is your laptop, with you. And obviously that's extended into leaving the office and going home or going somewhere else to be connected and work from, in that sense. So the pandemic has really, I suppose, accelerated a habit form rather than the technology that has been there. I know that with our earthquakes in New Zealand and Wellington over the previous sort of 5 years, that accelerated organisations, and particularly government, for getting their IT systems up to that remote working standard. And obviously that was a prerequisite to being able to deal with the pandemic in a much more smoother way through. How we go back to work, there's certainly going to be changes. I think it's given some people flexibility to sort of manage their lives in a better kind of way, because you can work at different times. You don't have to go to a certain place in a certain window to deliver your productivity for the organisation. So sort of self-management is going to become an increasing point. I think we are going to see a drop in the square meterage of organisations having as a permanent office. But again, I don't think that's reducing the density. I think it's just people are going to come and go from an organisation centre with a lot more fluidness, so that you won't get everybody there all the time. People will come in and out. So, and at the same point, I think you've got to look at, well, what does that do for your employees? And I think not just cramming them all in, but providing a more generous and workable environment for a sense of belonging, for cross-communication, sharing key resources will become more prevalent. So I think we're going to see a decline in how much commercial real estate office is taken up with organisations, because people are going to be working in different places, including home. But people do need to have a sense of belonging. So it's not as though organisations are going to just become virtual completely. So how that all sits in an economy that's going to go through quite a bit of turmoil over the next year or so. You know, I don't think we've really worked out what's coming. We've had the easy bit, in my view. Now we've got to get the machine running with a new set of behaviours and a new set of values as society. We've got some major global issues as well as local issues to deal with, and I think the key thing is just getting the right leadership to help us with that direction, and then get everybody back on track to a certain degree. I don't know whether you wanted to just touch on our Agile wall system that we've developed, because that's quite an interesting, I suppose, change in the office environment. Because what we've also seen as we've reduced costs down is that organisations have wanted to have a lot more flexibility in the components within the office environment. So the fixed office and building all the walls and offices in a permanent situation is really under attack, because organisations are tuning and changing, and they need their components within the office to have that flexibility. And obviously a hard fit out is a hard fit out as opposed to a soft fit out. So we're seeing the development of more furniture-based systems and not getting involved in massive changes to services within ceilings, as far as air conditioning and lighting and all the seismic impacts that have happened over the last few years in that sense. So that's why we developed the Agile wall, because effectively it was a combination of organisations losing wall space and whiteboard space to brainstorm and to journey map product development in the organisations. So having flexible temporary walls has been why the A-line system was developed initially for the BNZ, for their change of working methodology, both from an agile working point of view and from a facility point of view, of having something that they can rearrange without cost into different configurations for different work groups.